Hello everybody and welcome back to Sweet and Sour Soccer, and of course it's a quick turnaround this one because the weekend fixtures are done, but we are straight into our first midweek games in the Championship. Of course, the games being played Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday. We're starting to see this Championship season move much quicker now. We're getting into the thick of it, especially after the international break, and we're really starting to see some good and bad signs with different teams, aren't we? We're starting to see what maybe the Championship table could look like at the end. Of course, guys, if you have been keeping up with our weekly Championship videos, you know that me and Tom, who sometimes does appear on the videos, I've been going head-to-head each week. I will drop his predictions in the comments, as always, when he gives them to me. And yeah, we had a very good week, both getting 13 points, which means we're actually tied after 6 games weeks, which is pretty impressive. That's why I've put us all in green, all the things in green, because we both achieved 13 points. It was a good score and puts us up to 45 points overall. But guys, let's get straight into these Championship predictions and starting talking about the teams that we've got, because we start off with Preston, who take on Birmingham City, and Preston North End fans will continue to be delighted. Of course, in the last video, I spoke about how Preston might get on without Will Keane. Of course, he has been the talisman, but that did not matter at the weekend. They still managed to get 2 goals. They're still looking very good defensively, which is it's just common knowledge, isn't it, with Preston? That's what they tend to do. You know, and I think as well, coming into this game, being the home team, a lot of people will expect them to get the result. Birmingham, on the other hand, at the weekend, you know, they obviously got a red card in the 88th minute, which then led to 2 goals after the 88th minute. In the 90+1, the 90+6. And of course, it did mean that Birmingham City did end up losing their game against Watford. They did, as always, have less possession in that game. And for once, they kind of paid the price for it. I mean, before that red card, though, Birmingham were looking good, of course, and they would have obviously got a result. But, you know, that did ultimately change the game. I think it's going to be a very good competitive game, but I think we're seeing as well with Preston, they have got some good strength and depth. I think they'll be good at home this season, and I expect them to continue doing exactly what they have been doing. So I have gone Preston this one, and I've actually gone 2-0 to Preston as well. Let's move on to speaking about Cardiff City, who take on Coventry, and a much needed win for Cardiff City, actually. You know, that big win against Swansea, it's really going to give them some momentum, and to win it 2-0, you know, they'll just feel really good coming up against the Coventry team, who I think I mentioned in the last video, they had 3 draws in a row, and I predicted to draw that game against Hull. They did end up drawing that game against Hull, so 4 games in a row now where they have drawn. It's one of those, isn't it, when you're getting draws? At least you're not getting beat. But Coventry, they'll be feeling that they really need to start turning these draws into wins and really starting to build. They have got a relatively good chance to do that against Cardiff, but I do expect Cardiff, especially at home, to come into this game with some real momentum, especially after that big win against Swansea. And I think for that reason, I'm going to say another draw. Coventry, 5 in a row if I do get this right. It's Cardiff 1, Coventry 1. That is my prediction. Let's move on to, well, the other team that we just spoke about in, obviously, that derby between Cardiff and Swansea. Yeah, Swansea are looking really poor, aren't they? I think there's going to be a clear lack of goals for Swansea this season. Obviously, they sold both their strikers in the summer. Perot obviously went, the name slipped my head, but the other guy that they had up front as well last season that was getting the goals for them. They're both left, and you can really see that coming, really paying for them in how they're just playing in general. You know, they look like a side that is really struggling. This is 2 teams that obviously do need a massive boost, though. And this is 2 teams that I think will be going into this really wanting to get a win and just, you know, try and get some momentum coming into the season and starting to pick up some results. It's worth noting that for Swansea, something that they might hang on to is that QPR are yet to have a home win this season. The 2 wins that they have achieved, of course, have came away from home this season. So it just shows that maybe, you know, Loftus Road, QPR need to start getting a hold of that, because it's really important, isn't it, if you're going to have a good season, for you to be able to perform at home. And a lot of teams often perform at home better than what they do away from home. I think QPR will have a chance to do that, though, against Swansea, a Swansea team which, as I say, I think is a little bit scarce of goals. And for that reason, I'm going to back QPR at home. I'm going to say QPR 2, Swansea 1. Let's move on to speak about Saints now taking on Ipswich. And I think this is quite a tasteful game, this, because, you know, it's not been a good couple of games, as it Saints, either side of the international break. They got dominated by Sunderland. And then that game against Leicester, conceding 4. That's the problem with Saints for me. They're just conceding too many. I think they've still got a lot of quality going forward, especially in the Championship. But their problem is going to be that they are conceding. That's something that they've really got to try and get a hold of and solve. And I think it's one of those where, you know, if you just keep conceding as you are, you're not going to do a lot because, you know, it doesn't matter if you've got the might to go forward. You are plainly just conceding too many. Of course, Ipswich, you know, they've got a lot of quality in their squad, which will be a real test for this Saints team. Saints will be up for trying to get a result, though, especially at home. I think looking at, obviously, Ipswich, they managed to get the win against Sheffield Wednesday, wasn't it? But, you know, they're sitting in third, and it probably wasn't the most impressive win of the season, but that doesn't matter. For them, they're a dangerous team. They've got dangerous players, the likes of Chaplin, for example, and they can damage Saints in this game. I think this will be a really high-scoring game, so I've actually gone for a shared points, but I'm actually going to go for a 2-2 draw in this one. I do think Saints will continue to score, but as I said, they have got some might going up front. Let's move on to Bristol City taking on Plymouth now, and I always thought, I mean, look, location, these guys are an absolute mile away, aren't they? But you always wonder, like, I've always wondered, there's a little bit of something for Plymouth fans, especially when they look at this fixture, purely just because Plymouth are that just far from everyone. Is Bristol kind of like, in some regards, their local rival in terms of rivals that they are likely to play? Of course, you've got Exeter as well. It just always makes me laugh just how far Plymouth is from literally everything, really. But, you know, this game might have a little bit of bite. It'd be interesting to hear from both fan bases in the comments. You know, is this one of these games where there actually is a little bit of a rivalry feeling, despite, obviously, the big distance between the two teams? I think this is going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a fiery game. I think both teams will go at each other. I think, you know, this is one of those games for me that either team could win. Plymouth, I think they're going to be a different animal at home compared to away from home this season. And from what we've seen in the results, it is starting to tell. Plymouth are one of those teams that are just coming up slightly too short. And I think, you know, you look back at the most recent results and it's probably a little bit unkind to them how it actually looks, because they haven't been playing dreadful. They just aren't getting the points on the board. And I think for that reason, Bristol City will come into this thinking, yeah, we can get this, especially at home. I've backed them to get the result as well. I've gone 2-1 in this one to Bristol City. Let's move on to talking about two teams which, well, let's just say they're not doing too well, are they, in this championship at the moment? Two teams which yet to get a win, both winless. But I feel this is one of these where it's a good chance to go at each other, do something and try and turn your fortunes around, you know, pulling off a big result. It's probably too early to say that this is like a massive relegation battle clash. I just find it so interesting that if we were sitting here at the start of the season, we're, you know, looking at the bookies odds, looking at, you know, even myself and my predictions, I expected Middlesbrough to be the other end of the table, if anything. I thought they were really going to challenge for the honours and maybe get into the playoffs, etc. If they've got any hope of doing that this season, they really need to get a move on. But I have, as I've said, I've looked at that team and it doesn't look great. Same can be said for Sheffield Wednesday. I do honestly think this isn't two teams that just started the season horribly. I think this is two teams that, in my opinion, are going to struggle this season. But bit of momentum is huge in the Championship. How many times do we see a team start off the season badly and then just go on a mad run? You know, I think back to when Nottingham Forest got promoted. Of course, they did it in a season where they were like bottom, weren't they, after like 10 games? And that's why the Championship, like, the teams are just so close to each other, and building up a good feeling, a bit of momentum can really make a big difference. And I think two teams here will be trying to get the result and, you know, to do exactly that. Unfortunately for both teams, I've given neither of you guys the result. I've actually gone for a 1-1 draw in this one, but it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Let's move on speaking about Millwall, who take on Rotherham. And of course, it was a heavy defeat at the hands of Leeds for Millwall as I'm recording this today. Yeah, Millwall are an interesting one because usually at home, they're like a really tough team to beat. But I think they've already had a couple of defeats at home this season, if I'm not mistaken. But usually, typically, Millwall do very well at home. Now, home form is usually good. It's usually not a pleasant place to go. And I even saw some videos on social media between the Millwall and Leeds fans having a bit of back and forth with each other, which just showed exactly what I expected from those two clubs, really. They were just giving it thick and thin to each other, and it was a bit of a laugh to just watch, I'll be honest. But Rotherham, they'll be coming into this also, needing a win themselves. They've got players that can get the goals, but I fancy Millwall to turn this around at home. So I'm actually going to go for Millwall. I'm going to go 2-0 to Millwall in this one. I just fancy them to turn it around and get a bit of a result. Let's speak about Watford now, who take on West Brom. And as I said earlier on in the video, of course, it was 2 late goals for Watford, which was a huge result for them against Birmingham. You imagine, is that going to give them a bit of that emotional boost? It's a good feeling, isn't it? Especially to get 2 goals late on. It's something that can really just uplift the team. Will they take that now into their next game at Vicarage Road? Obviously, it is Vicarage Road, isn't it? Yeah. Against West Brom. For me, this is a really interesting game and a hard one to call because this is 2 teams for me that I think both teams have good potential. But two teams that can also look not that good at times. And I'm really starting to think with these guys, the problem is going to be inconsistency. I think sometimes both these teams look like they could be way higher up in the table. Other times they both look like they're actually doing much better in the table than where they perhaps should be. I think these are one of these teams that I'm looking out for. Can they get a bit of a run? Can they start to build some consistency? Because I think both have that quality there to do so. But this makes it a hard game to predict, especially for that reason, because it's like, well, it's ultimately going to depend on which, team turns up in the better form in terms of, which version of both teams turn up. But I have backed the home team narrowly. I've gone for a 1-0 Watford win just for them to just get the job done. Could go either way, though. Hi, guys. Just a quick one for me before we get back to the video. If you've watched us before, you already know what I'm going to ask. Please, can you do me a massive favour and hit that like button? And if you're new here, please do subscribe to the channel as well. We do these on a weekly basis, so there's going to be plenty of Championship content on this channel. And let's get back to this week's Championship predictions. So let's move on speaking about Blackburn, who take on Sunderland next. And spoke about this player a couple of times in my videos already, Smodix. Of course, he seems to be the guy that's getting the goals out for Blackburn after Ben Brereton Diaz did leave last season. Overall, they look like a good team, Blackburn. They look like goals are there. But this is going to be a really interesting game because they take on a Sunderland team that, seem to be building that momentum. The big win that they got just before the international break and a big win that they obviously did get at the weekend as well. And, they've got some good, talented, and especially young players that are looking good. The likes of Jack Clark, he looks good. They've got Barr. I think he's only like 19 years old, isn't he? The midfielder for them. And, of course, they have got Jude Bellingham's younger brother and Job Bellingham as well. There's a bit of a good field building with Sunderland, and I think that's going to be something that might help them out in this season. They'll want to go one better than what they did last season. They did manage to get into the playoffs. They'll at least be hoping, can they get into the playoff finals and maybe even to that promised land? Of course, Blackburn are a team that have always been there or thereabouts the last few seasons. Have they got enough to get into the playoffs? I think this is going to be a really interesting game. This is 2 teams that have got goals in them. This is 2 teams that will go at each other. And I think for that reason, I'm going to predict a tasteful game. I'm going to say 2 each in this one between these 2 teams. Let's move on to speak about Hull City now, who take on Leeds. And this is a Hull team that look good. It's a good team. It's impressive. They've got good players. They've had a good transfer window. All in all, I think it's a much more positive environment around Hull than perhaps it would have been the past couple of seasons where, especially 2-3 seasons ago, they were like struggling quite a bit, weren't they? More down towards the bottom. I don't think we're going to see that Hull City team anywhere near the bottom, or maybe even the bottom half this season. I do think they'll be a shoo-in for top half. Leeds, an interesting one, isn't it? Because I feel with Leeds, they're maybe one of those teams that are actually building now that the transfer window's done. The transfer window is very turbulent for them. They had lots of players leaving. They had players going on strike. They had, a lot of questions asked. And I bet even the players that were there and not moving on were a bit like, oh, God, what's going on around here? And I think for that reason, now the transfer window's shut, this is really where we might see Leeds coming into their own. They obviously showed that at the weekend. Joel Perreault, what a signing he's going to be. He's a striker that will probably get maybe 20, 25 goals in this Leeds team because he's going to get the service. They've still got some good quality players, especially for the Championship. So I do think they are going to kick on. But in this fixture, I just narrowly fancy Hull. So I think Leeds are going to be okay overall. But in this fixture, I've gone for a 2-1 Hull win. Let's move on to speak about Huddersfield, who take on Stoke now. And obviously, it's been a bit of a turnaround for Huddersfield in the last couple of games. Obviously, back-to-back wins, building that little bit of momentum. They were at home, coming into this at home against a Stoke team, which I keep saying this about Stoke. They need a win. They're underperforming. The quality is there for me. I think Stoke are a very good team on paper, but whether it's the manager's fault, whether it's the player's fault, whether it's a combination of everything, something is just not going well there. This team is not getting the best out themselves. And it's going to be really interesting to see how long, that resolve will last, especially with the manager. For me, I think this could go either way. It's much like the majority of games in the Championship. But I don't know. Just a random feeling. I just have a feeling that Stoke are going to edge it. I've gone for 2-1 Stoke in this game. Guys, on to the last one. It is Leicester who take on Norwich, or Norwich who take on Leicester. Norwich are the home team. And these are two, for me, like the juggernauts of the two heavyweights of this division for me. From what I've seen so far this season, they've both been a delight to watch. They're both big hitters. If this was a boxing fight, there would be two big heavyweights. It'd be like a Wilder versus Fury kind of fight, or an AJ versus Fury kind of fight. This is two teams that have got a lot of might, a lot of power. They can definitely both hurt each other. And I think this is going to be a really enjoyable game for those that get to watch it. I think this is going to be a good game. It could go either way. Obviously, Leicester, it's good for them that they managed to get that big result against Saints at the weekend. They've turned around from the one last that they did pick up. And they also managed to make sure that Manager of the Month award that their new manager did win didn't end up to be a curse in disguise. For this one, guys, I'm going to go for another draw. I feel like I've gone for a few draws this week, actually. Maybe a little bit too many, but I'm going to call it down the middle. I'm going to say 1-1 in this game. Guys, those are my predictions. As I said, with Tom's predictions, I will put them in the comments. And as I said earlier on in the video, if you have enjoyed the video, please do me a favor, hit that like button. Please do subscribe to the channel. And I'll catch you on the next predictions video, which will obviously be midweek. Take care. Goodbye.